On this week's Most Craved.
Superhero fights.
Superhero fights!
Hey guys, welcome to Most Craved. I'm Jenna Busch with Legion of Leia.
I'm Silas Lesnick with ComingSoon.net.
And I'm William Bibbiani with CraveOnline. Hey, you guys, superhero fights. They're all the rage right now. But should they be a thing? We'll find out right this second. Hi, guys.
Hi.
Hello.
Yes, we are getting a lot of superheroes fighting each other. We've got Captain America Civil War, Batman v Superman, got Daredevil and Punisher.
We got the Flash and Supergirl racing each other. That seems like it's a good fun.
Not the same, but
not the same, but it's a competition nonetheless. Friendly. Well, we had Arrow and Flash fight a while ago, but like right now it's all coming together, and this is something that comic book fans have seen over and over and over again, kind of since the beginning. Since the first two superheroes met each other, they had to fight first, realize they had a misunderstanding, and then team up to fight the bad guy, and now that's going to happen in every movie.
well, I don't know. I mean, obviously, if you've got any characters, even outside of superheroes, you're going to have conflicts between them. It's much more interesting sometimes to have two characters that you care about actually have some kind of conflict instead of just the big bad guy who you're supposed to hate. Unless you do it really, really well like Fisk and Daredevil, where you're like, oh, I know he's a bad guy, but I'm kind of rooting for him just a little bit because he's so cool. Like,
I think what you have with superheroes is in any characters, they have a conflict in telling a story. And by nature of superheroes, what they do is fight. And the fight can become physical because they have these superpowers. But what it ultimately gets down to is a clashing of philosophies. And it's curious to see as all of these different things approach sort of classic philosophies clashing, which ones are able to pull it off and which ones aren't.
Well, if you look at sort of the history of superhero and even a lot of supervillain fights in our movies in particular, the ones that we've seen lately, most of the actual fist fights have been kind of pointless, have ultimately boiled down to, all right, we fought each other, but now we realize we have something in common, or now Dr. Octopus knows that he was being kind of a jerk, or we stopped the MacGuffin from doing the thing and now fighting is pointless. Usually the problems aren't actually solved with their fists, they're solved by telling the Hulk to calm down. So what bothers me is that a lot of times the actual fights, which is what we're here for, ultimately seem a little pointless and seem like just sort of fan pandering.
well, no, they're just fun to watch. And also, you've been to a bar on Saturday night, right? Like, most fistfights are pointless, and yet they always happen.
And that's why we condone them.
Well, no, but I mean, it's fun to watch on screen. I mean, it just is. It's fun to watch two guys with superpowers go at each other. I mean, I think
You
it's
say
fascinating.
it's fun, but you haven't seen Batman versus
That is
Superman.
true. That's
Unfortunately,
true.
we
Well,
have.
yes. No,
Yeah.
I mean, but if you look at something like Daredevil and Punisher and that kind of fight, you know, I mean, that's fascinating to me. And again, it's the same thing. It's philosophies that are very different about how to go about things and which one's going to win. And it's sort of symbolic that they're physically fighting over it when you're really sort of debating which side is right.
Well, and that's actually an interesting case. Now, I haven't seen the second half of Daredevil yet because my internet connection was screwed up this weekend. Thanks, Time Warner. But what we did have was an initial fight between Daredevil and the Punisher, which was cool. Not amazing, but
I
cool.
thought it was cool.
The best part for me was when they actually stopped fighting and they talked. Like, that was insane. That's the scene, and it's from the great Garth Ennis Punisher comic, where the Punisher has chained Daredevil up on a rooftop and said, the only way to stop me from committing murder is to become me. What are you going to do? Now, the show changed the ending of that because it's on Daredevil's side more than Punisher's, but that was extremely exciting storytelling, way more than just watching them punch each other for me. Now, I'm not saying I don't like it when superheroes punch each other. It's cool. I just want to make sure there's a reason for it, and I just want to make sure it doesn't feel like we're completely skipping over more interesting stuff.
You know what? That scene, I thought Daredevil did that wonderfully, and it's one of the things that I think is really missing from Batman vs. Superman is there's never a conversation, and there's never a point where the characters talk about what they stand for and where that comes into conflict.
I think they talk about, again, we don't want to spoil anything for anybody because it isn't out yet. Silas and I have seen it, Jenna hasn't. I will say this, They talk about it a lot. They don't have a conversation. There's a lot of yelling of their philosophies, but there's not a conversation.
Not only do we have Daredevil versus Punisher, but there's also a really great scene with Foggy Nelson in Daredevil season 2, where he talks down two guys in a hospital who are about to break out in a fight, and he just explains to them why what they're doing is stupid. They can fight later if they hate each other, but they need to stop right now. And it's just a logical speech that I wish we saw a bit more of in Batman vs. Superman. I hope we get in Civil War.
I have a feeling we're going to get more of that in Civil War because it is, I mean, the physical fight is very much about the clash of two philosophies and the clash of like, of how much freedom you give up to feel safe. And I mean, I'm really excited to see that. But I mean, I think that's a conflict of like, I mean, you kind of have to discuss it. Otherwise it doesn't make sense. And we've already even seen in the trailers just like the friendship aspect between Iron Man and Cap and how that's sort of splitting. And
Well, what I think is sort of interesting, really, is if you think about it, we talked about sort of the origin of the superhero fight in comic books. Those comic books, while brilliant, they came from a different era, and they were way more fun, and they were way more youth-oriented. They were just supposed to be entertaining stories. Now we're taking these really, really seriously. We talk about, philosophical arguments. We're talking about, what does Superman represent by his nature. We're taking superheroes so seriously now that it's difficult to simply enjoy the action. We have to think about it. And if we have to think about it, then it shouldn't insult our intelligence. And I think that's the danger, is that we're asking people to take these things so seriously that if they can't be taken seriously, then they fail. Whereas it would have been fine if Batman just fought Superman and it was fun.
I think one of the things in that case in particular that is troublesome is that the film has muddied Superman into Batman to being essentially the same character. They're both,
I can see that from the trailers.
Yeah.
They're both these like powerful guys that if it comes to it, they'll kill someone. They probably would rather not, but
They have no compunction about it whatsoever. In Batman v
it's
Superman.
one of the first scenes in Batman v Superman is Superman shoving a guy through a concrete wall, and it's like
That seems wrong.
That's not like, and yeah, he's an asshole, he's a bad guy, but it doesn't seem like something Superman would do. And if you don't have a Superman that has a level of compassion, the conflict with Batman isn't interesting because you need somebody. Otherwise, they're just these two assholes that are yelling at each other.
Well, in order to get them into conflict, that movie has to spend half the film basically turning Batman into a villain, basically convincing Batman not just that Superman is a danger to himself and others, but he's actually like in the moral right to kill Superman. That is like, holy crap. Like, that's okay. That's good for Batman. This is a weird interpretation of Batman.
Well, there's a thing. Sometimes it is really cool to see superheroes that we're used to seeing. Although I have to say they've been dark in the comics for a long time.
Yes.
But even superheroes that we know as fun and like cool to watch and making them dark, like sometimes that works, and then sometimes you're clearly doing it just to do it.
I'm really fascinated to see the more specifics about Civil War too, just in terms of what precisely is the conflict.
Yeah.
Because in the comics, I found myself very much on Captain America's side.
Right.
What really intrigues me about Civil War is Vision being on Iron Man's side.
Yeah.
Because Vision is, in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, virtuous enough to lift Thor's hammer.
Yep.
So it's hard to imagine him doing anything that would be wrong.
Yeah.
Context definitely matters, I think, in every case. And every film has the opportunity to write its own parameters. I don't think Batman v Superman did terribly well. But when you're talking about the sort of the gritty superheroes, and we talk about how we've had that for a while, when we go back to where the grittiness started, we tend to think back to Frank Miller and his runs on Daredevil, and particularly The Dark Knight Returns. We have been latched onto that motif, the idea of that really gruff, really violent, very tortured Batman for so long, that I wonder if it's no longer interesting for me for that reason. When The Dark Knight Returns came out, it ran counter to what we knew of Batman. It was new and exciting. Now it's the norm. Now, we take it as read that Batman will fight Superman, but the context has completely changed in the new movie, whereas Superman represented a very right-wing propaganda state in The Dark Knight Returns. Now Batman is representing that. It's weird.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely don't mind the gritty. I like gritty. I'm totally cool. Yeah, all gritty. That's great. I also really like things like Ant-Man, which is fun, like the idea of having a fun one too. And I think DC has been going grittier because they've always had sort of squeaky clean superheroes, whereas Marvel is going lighter and they've always been the slightly more tortured ones. So I just do it well, and I'll watch it.
Well, listen, we'll be back next week with a spoiler-filled talk about Batman v Superman. We sort of danced around some things. There's a lot we have to talk about, and we really want to wait for Jenna to see it so we can all
Yes.
talk about it in detail. So tell us what you think about superhero fights. Who do you want to fight? Is fight good? Good fight? And Twitter here. And we'll be back next week with more stuff.